Hey y'all, it's David Ducker coming back at you, and today we'll be talking about ranged weapon styles, long distance fighting styles. A lot of people who are big into cinematic combat, like I am, tend to shy away from some of the ranged weapons. I'm especially going to be talking about medieval style, slings, javelins, bows, crossbows, throwing axes, throwing knives, etc., etc. But a lot of people shy away from it. If you're describing how you fight with a spear, you've got a ton of different moves you can do. You can trip with the butt, you can slash, you can thrust, you can switch it off into either hand, as you will. There's just a ton of things you can do with a spear, or if you imagine that you have an axe and a dagger, you can hook them with the axe blade. You can hook the back of their head in, stab them in the gut. You could chop away and distract them so that they don't notice when you come in with that dagger. With melee weapons, there's a lot that you can do stylistically to make your fighter different from every other fighter, regardless of if he's a fighter class or not. I don't really like class-based systems anyway, but there's a lot you can do melee to make you different and unique. But often it really feels like with archery, you don't have that much agency with it. How can you make one archer really different from another? Well, I will tell you how. Because with archery, it's not about you, really. It's about your opponent. So with archery, and that's two ways. Two ways is about your opponent. First, how does he react to being under fire? Does he cover up? Does he charge in to try to close that gap? Does he run away? Does he seek cover and try to hide behind cover? Does he get a human shield in front of him and get his buddy in there? So that's one way. How does he react? And you can narrate that if you're the archer. You can narrate that. When your GM says describe your attack, you can say I start firing arrows off, and he covers up with his shield, or whatever. However you want to narrate him, you can do that. So that's one way, and that you can do, or the GM can do. The other way, it's still about your opponent, but it does show something about you. And that's your aim, where you hit him, where you aim at. So a great example, we were playing a session yesterday, and there was a Minotaur, and he had a big axe in one hand and a torch in his other because it was dark. And Scotty has his longbow, and he shoots off an arrow. And so Minotaur is standing there, and the arrow hits him in the forearm and pins his arm to his chest. And the torch he's holding goes right into his eye. Now the arrow actually killed him, but the torch set his head on fire, and he's lilting around. His head catches on fire, and then finally he falls on the ground. Like, that was awesome. So, and Scotty has established that archer is different from every other archer because he tries to pin your arms to your body using his arrows to hold it on there. So if he's fighting a guy with a sword and shield, and he manages to catch that sword arm, he might pin it. He's got his sword pinned into his thigh. He's got this arrow coming in. He's trying to fight now with just his shield and pull his arm free so that so he can use that sword again, or maybe he drops the sword. So that's Scotty's style. I'm going to pin his arms to his body with my arrows. That's my signature move, So that's awesome. But you can also do other things. Like you could have an archer who always headshots. I shoot him right through the eyeball, right through the mouth. I shoot him in the back of the head, in his ear, an arrow right through his ear. But you could have the headshot specialist. You could have the guy who pins him to the body, which also works with crossbows or javelins. You could have a guy who shoots the extremities. I always shoot his legs out, perhaps. Or I always shoot his arm so he drops his weapon. You know, so you can make each archer very different. You can have a party of, you know, like 5 archers, and one shoots the legs, and one shoots the arms, and one shoots the arms, pinning them to the body, and one shoots the head, and you know, one just goes for body shots, and that might be simple and boring in some ways, but you're much less likely to miss. And you can reflect all of this mechanically. You get a ranged disarm, ranged trip for the leg shot. You can get a I mean, even pinning his arm to his body is kind of a ranged disarm, like pretty much. Um, you know, you can do a called shot into the head. You can change up your feat selection to reflect this, or your qualities, or your uh, talents, whatever your system is using. It should have enough to customize if it's a good system. And it could even be something as simple as you know, I use a really high-powered crossbow, but it takes forever to load. Or somebody else might say, I have a bow that's a composite recurve bow, so my strength goes right into the arrow. But it doesn't have good base damage, and it doesn't have good armor pen. Whereas this other guy might have a longbow, so his strength doesn't really matter mechanically. So maybe you could describe him as being more thin. You know, there's a million ways you can customize these things with mechanics, if the mechanics are there to help you as well. You know, I just made up a bunch of templates for Game of Thrones. So we've got the recurve bow, which is good for strong archers. The longbow, which is got some armor pen and really high base damage and some armor pen. And then we've got crossbows, which have a huge amount of armor pen, but their base damage isn't that good. And you could describe this. You know, you could describe how the crossbow is more accurate, how the longbow, though, might have better rate of fire, perhaps, or armor pen, or whatever you're doing. You know, these are some examples, but you can certainly go in and detail that to a large degree. Both stylistically and mechanically. And you can talk to your GM too about where he wants the two to intersect. Because you could describe you're firing this hail of arrows, and the bad guy has his shield, and his shield is getting pin cushioned with arrows, and then you just stop, and then he peeks his head up to see if you're out of arrows, and that's when you get the final arrow right through his eyeball. So some systems, you know, some GMs would want that to mechanically reflect and say, well, you know, you'd have to use multi-shot to describe your action as that. Whereas some GMs would say, no, that's a standard attack as far as I'm concerned, because mechanically it is standard attack. But stylistically it's so much cooler than that. So that'll depend a lot on your GM, right? You know, for myself, I'm going to be somewhere in the middle, because I do count arrows, because I love it when you run out of arrows, because it's dramatic and exciting. But generally, I don't really care that much if the mechanics and the description match. I try to make sure mine do, but if yours don't, I don't care. As long as you have a good description, I don't care if you back it up with mechanics or not, because the description is the important part to me. And you can also do this to some degree with modern and future weapons as well. So if you've got an assault rifle, again, you can have the guy who comes through and I spray at his legs, and he dives under cover because he's scared, or I try to pump him full of lead in his body, and you know, maybe he just dies. You know, maybe he just dies, or you know, it could be I try to shoot his hand or his head, or I try to shoot his gun, or if he has grenades on his belt, oh, I shoot his grenade. Oh, that'd be a boom, awesome. Or you know, whatever you want to do. It's a little harder because you can't get that arrow pinning to his body. I love that. There's so many different scenarios you can do. You can, you know, pin his upper arm to his body. His forearm can go into his leg, or his stomach or his chest. You can even get his hand pinned into his chest or wherever. So it's great because then the opponent has to adapt. You can't really do that with firearms, modern firearms. But you do have then the automatic weapons, and they have a different feel to them. Do I fire up into the air so he dives on the ground, and then when he's on the ground I just angle my shot, finish him off? Or again, do I shoot at his legs so he panics and starts to run? And then when he's running, I just pick him off then? Or do I pump his body full of lead? Or do I switch to single fire and aim really carefully and get that headshot, or shoot his hand so he drops his weapon and now he's disarmed, or shoot his leg so that he falls on the ground? Whatever you want to do. Or shoot his grenade so he explodes, which is awesome. But that's my little ramble on ranged weapon styles. So don't be afraid. Get that crossbow. Get that recurve bow. Get that longbow. Get that shotgun. Get all these ranged weapons. Make them unique, interesting. Have a finishing move, a signature move for your character. And it doesn't have to be incredibly flashy. It can be just something as simple as I shoot his leg, and when he falls on the ground, I shoot him in the head, or I shoot him in the body now that he's prone. That can be if you consistently use that to kill bad guys. If the GM says, you killed him, describe how, as opposed to you hit him, describe how. Those are my two cues. I'm like, you hit him. Then the player knows I'll describe how I hurt him, but not how I killed him. So they'll describe, I tried to hit him in the head, but he raised his arm, and all I did was cut in through his arm. Versus if I tell the player, you killed him, describe how. Then they'll launch into their finishing move. And say, I came down to swing with my axe, and he stepped back though, but what he didn't know is I used the momentum of the axe, and I came through, and I spin all the way around, so that I come back through with the tornado axe, and then I catch him on that second hit. So there's a ton of great things. I did my video on signature moves and fighting styles, but I wanted to specifically hone in on ranged weapons, because they don't get enough love from the cinematic crowd. So get your sniper rifle out there. Get a sling. Slings are incredibly dangerous. Get a javelin or whatever you got to do. Whatever you got to do to put them away. Some SMGs or perhaps a flamethrower. Imagine a guy who just flamethrowers their legs and they fall down into the flame. Oh. But that's my little ramble on ranged weapons. So let me know if you got any more tips and tricks on making archers and rangers more exciting, any snipers. Or let me know if you've seen this well done or poorly done. I know I've seen it poorly done. I shoot him, and as boring as anything. But I do hope that you have a good day and good gaming. Oh yeah.